reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great. Welcome to all of our guests this evening. First, let's begin with a motion to approve the agenda. Motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Okay, any discussion?
I do have some discussion. Since the acapella group just kind of came out, we want to move the... Or we just have...
Student comments.
Yeah.
They technically are commenting, but commenting with music.
Oh, again.
Okay, so the agenda has been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Next item is the approval of the open session minutes of November 3rd, 2014. Motion to approve those minutes, please.
Make a motion to approve the open session minutes from November 3rd, 2014.
Great, is there any discussion on those minutes? All right, hearing none. All those in favor? Keep by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. Next, we will, are there any members of the community who have comments that we wish to have at this time? Okay, hearing none, we'll move to student comments and welcome the acapella group.
My name is Anne-Marie Tremblay, and I'm the choral director here at Denmark. I am very pleased that I'm performing for you in the Still of the Night. And we have two soloists, Atea Bai, and then we have Matt O'Brien. So enjoy.
Precious love, so before again, with all of your mind, still of the night, Shua, 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 Shua. Shua, oh, Shua, 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 in the still of the night. Shoo, 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 in the still of the night.
We have, that's the take note, by the way. They've named themselves this year the take note. Boys a cappella group. So next is the harmonics, which is the girls a cappella group. I'm happy to say that with our feeder program now thriving over at MISCO, we have an increase in numbers, which is why this year I decided to separate the groups into boys and girls, but they also perform together too. And girls, the other night they performed for the ninth graders, ninth grade families and students that came and visited in park, and they performed in the lobby, so there was a lot of energy and excitement when families walked in. So we thought, why not come tonight and perform for you? It's their second performance of the year. So we have a great year planned. And this is the harmonics. They're going to take you back to the 80s for Sweet Dreams Are Made of This. Sweet dreams are made of things. Who am I to disagree? Travel the world and sell it all ease. Everybody's looking for something. Some of them want to use you.
very much.
Great. We still have the 9
Mrs. Brigham, stand.
I believe they have concerts coming up, and Reese is coming up.
So they do a separate concert?
I believe as part of the chorus concert here, so watch John's memo, because that will be
When
coming
we
up.
have the winter concert, which I believe is December 10th.
The Wednesday night that week, I don't know what the exact date is.
Sweet. All right. Next, Chris is not with us this evening. I suppose we'll move on to superintendent comments.
Okay. Okay, so we'll start with the good news and we'll progress down. Just as I put in my background notes, for the second straight year, a week ago Friday, Netmark held its second annual STEM College and Career Fair. This year we had over 40 different professionals representing different STEM-related fields, STEM colleges. We had WPI, we had Wellesley College, and so on, represented for the entire school community. A very large fair, exhibit hall was done in the gymnasium. This year it was great in that we invited the 8th graders up, so we bused the 8th graders up to the high school for the event. Our 57 students that are an outstanding day in the sense that they had different workshops for themselves in the fair, but also had an opportunity, once again, very similar to last year's program, where they spent some time with a couple of professional recruiters from EMC, which kind of talked about basic workplace skills and the process of actually applying and interviewing for a position. So they also had an opportunity to connect with Professor Liz Ryder from WPI in learning about STEM-related opportunities at WPI. So all in all, a terrific day. I know some plans to expand this program to make it available to even more students. So all in all, a very, very successful day once again. The second, sure. Yeah.
Just so that I can get a better understanding, like, does it encompass the whole day is devoted to STEM, or is it part of their day? Like, how does it work? You said that there's the STEM scholars, but there's also all students in grade C.
Yeah, the day is basically 2/3 of the day. It starts around 8:30 and it goes to 12:15.
Okay.
So they have the fair actually set up in the gymnasium.
So that's like little booths with different, like the robotics and
Correct,
okay.
correct. But the STEM Scholar Gymnasium, being able to touch base with all the exhibitors. But then they go off to the auditorium in different breakout sessions for their individual sessions.
Okay. How do you become a STEM scholar?
It's an application process, and it's open to juniors and seniors, and it's held in the springtime before the
Okay. So it's an application process. Do you have to have certain grades, or how is it determined how you get into the STEM Scholars Program?
It is based upon grades, but it's also based upon the courses that you selected, and also what you're interested in studying beyond. Okay. So anyway, this is quite a bit about the Foundation Budget Review Commission. It has been selected as far as the actual representation on the commission. The total commission size, I want to say, is in the ballpark of about 15 to 20 individuals across the state, and they're commencing their work, and it's being co-chaired by Senator Sonia Diaz-Chang and also Representative Alice Peisch, who are the co-chairs of the Joint Committee on Education. And they're starting their work by a series of forums to be held across the state. Actually, the first one was this afternoon up on the North Shore in Danvers. The one for Saturday, January 24th, and I'm told it'll be at Bay Path Regional Vocational School. I think the significant thing, and I shared this with you in your packet, there is the intention of a group of us, of superintendents for Worcester County, of small districts, and by small that would be 3,000 students or less, that have jointly authored a letter to the commission sharing specific concerns about the challenges, particularly with the many unfunded mandates or underfunded mandates that they pose, but also together with a lot of appreciation goes to Nancy Spatulnik, who is the retired superintendent from Northbridge, but she's also been serving as the interim superintendent of Douglas, and she's really pulled all this together. So if you go through that letter, a lot of those points should be nothing strange to you. I think they really represent things that we've discussed as a full committee, things that we definitely discussed as a budget subcommittee about the challenges that we face. So, again, I remain cautiously optimistic. I mean, if you recall a year ago this time, it was questionable whether this commission was really even going to take off the ground. Probably about a year. Senator Diaz-Chang, Chang, I always mess that up. And she was, I would say, a little bit on the pessimistic side, but the political will would exist to see this commission take off. So here we are. They are meeting. They are in the initial phase of gathering testimony on where people's minds are with regard to the funding formula. So I will keep you posted the closer that we get.
Just to refresh my memory, she said that it would never happen, and it did happen.
Mm-hmm.
But she said they would never do it because they knew it was unfair, and they didn't want to see the actual results. And then to look at your letter and just go through, which was all the stuff that we know, and how unfair it is for, and how unfair it
The
is.
first bullet point about how deeper and deeper you fall behind for the many districts, and I think virtually every district that signed off on that letter received their additional bump in Chapter 70 funding was $25 per student. So think about that again. Budget subcommittee just met. Once again, that will represent $59,000 in additional funding. Yep. So we shall see.
Have they laid out a timeline in terms of...
No, not yet. The only timeline that they've laid out, Phil, is just the timeline of those
initial
forums. Yeah.
Okay. And the forums are going to be held just to get feedback from, educational representatives?
Essentially, right now, the parameters that they've laid out, I believe they are 2.5 hour forums, and they're giving 3 hours of testimony per speaker. Nancy's 3 minutes. Whoops, sorry.
3 hours is a long time.
Yeah.
To prepare.
So Dr. Spatulnik from Douglas is working together with the Superintendent's Association to say, okay, seeing that this letter represents so many districts and so many superintendents, can we jointly give a presentation to the Central Massachusetts?
Use our 30 minutes collaboratively.
Perhaps. The third piece, and this is where the fun begins, is that we received word over the last week or so to trim $325 million out of the FY 15 state budget. And typically, when this happens, it's referred to as 9C cuts. We were in this situation last year, if you recall, that there was word that we were looking at potential 9C cuts based upon the revenue streams being below benchmarks where they were. And then once the November, December, and then post-holiday revenues came in, they caught up. I do think that there is a little bit of a twist, though, in the sense that the reduction in the income tax rate come January from 5.2 to 5.15%. Plus, there's also a projected $175 million shortfall in non-tax revenues, such as fees. So these are all things that are leading to, again, a projected $325 million deficit, or at least projected deficit. So right now things are very, very unclear. I had the opportunity to talk to John Fernandez late last week. Again, complete speculation, but he felt like Chapter 70 and local aid would be secure. However, if there's one place that we might be vulnerable.
So, I mean, this is less than a 1% cut
In
the overall state budget. So they're
I think what was put out in some of the initial guidance, I believe it was a 1.5% cut. Or certainly
325 million of
36.
36.5 billion is only 0.9 billion.
But-
Bad math going on in the State House.
But true.
I understand what you're saying. It'd be interesting to see how they distribute the cuts across the areas.
Correct. Some of the initial guidance said that certain departments were expecting a 1.5% cut across all areas.
Yep.
So, out of caution, has been to freeze our district budget until further notice, until we see where exactly this comes out. Any questions on any of that? And then, last but not least, as I do every month, you have in front of you the year-to-date expenditure report for this year's budget. Jay, if you could touch upon where we are and also some concerns that you might have.
Sure. All right, so there are a couple of little red flags that have come up over the last couple of weeks here that have me somewhat concerned. I'm not, the sky isn't falling yet. One of them we talked about, I think, previously, starting in January, that has the potential to cost us $60,000 in increased electrical costs. We're still working on trying to negotiate a contract and see if we can get that price to a little bit better price than what National Grid is proposing. So that's one thing that I'm a little bit concerned about right now. In addition, we did see an increase in our out-of-district tuition costs of about $52,000. So between those two, that's $110,000 that was not budgeted for, that we have some concerns about. Lastly, the other thing that has come up, and I think we talked about this recently, was the cost of filtration at Nisco Hill because of the higher manganese levels in the water. We have an engineering firm that's putting together proposals to submit. I think we're going to discuss this further on Wednesday, but we're looking at anywhere from an upfront cost of about $60,000 to an upfront cost of about $18,000 The problem is that the cheaper version up front costs $10,000 a year because it's a system that sets up 9 tanks that have to be replaced every 2 weeks. So those tanks tend to add up, so you're looking at an annual maintenance cost of another $10,000 a year. So we're trying to weigh the pros and cons of whether we want to have a short, long-term expenditure, short-term expenditure, and how we want to balance that out. We are going to have to do something, and it's going to be one of those, so I think you can easily count that we're going to be spending anywhere from $20,000 to $60,000 on water filtration at Biscoe Hill in the next month. We need to monitor the budget. It played into why we put the freeze on right now until we see what happens from the state level. It's always, somewhat concerning when the state tells you they're not going to give you money. They said they were going to give you. If it turns out that that's $5,000, we're probably okay. If it turns out it's $100,000, well, then we're going to have an issue. So there are some red flags that we just need to monitor real closely over the next 4 weeks and sort of see where we end up, and then we can determine the next course of action. That's it. You want the chorus to come back in and sing now? You want anything up?
Certainly better news than you.
Yeah, no kidding. I realize that.
And that's all.
Okay. All right.
Good job with what you do. Because that's what's E&D, that's what our E&D accounts for. We're going to expect a special ed of $50,000. So cheers to you for having, doing such a good job. And so we have some money in that account so we can deal with these issues that people are on. Because if we didn't have the money in E&D, we would be stuck.
And I will put on the agenda for December 8th the whole discussion of the filtration system. There's pros and cons to both sides, but realize too, if you go for the long-term solution that is at least less expensive long-term, but you take what's the life of the existing well that we have anyway. So I think we can have a good, without getting super technical about it on December 8th, I'll bring it back to the full committee for deliberation.
All right, we'll move on to subcommittee updates. Again, policy subcommittee, and policy subcommittee met immediately prior to this meeting at 6 p.m. We discussed some policies that needed to be revised, namely policy DJE on bidding requirements needs to be updated. That will be brought to the full committee for first read on the 8th of December. And policy ADDA, background checks, has some information for first read on December 8th as well. I think that's it for the policy subcommittee. Moving to the budget subcommittee.
We had our first meeting last week, and we set a tentative timetable. Basically, it's carbon copy of last year. And then ironically, after that, we met with the multi-board. So we met with both representatives of FinCom and Board of Selectmen. So it was a good open discussion, so we're off and running.
So next we move on to old business. Minutes, according to policy EEC on executive sessions, we should be periodically reviewing executive session minutes and releasing them, declassifying them, releasing them upon request. So Superintendent Bluescheck and I have been reviewing several sets of minutes, and we're recommending them for declassification. So the dates being, for 2012, the executive session minutes from August 13th, August 27th, September 24th, and November 5th. From 2013, the executive session minutes from March 4th, from April 8th, from June 17th, and from October, January 27th, February 10th, March 3rd, May 19th, August 11th, August 25th, and September 22nd. So all of those executive session minutes were found in your packet that was distributed to you before this meeting. And as I said, we recommend those for declassification and release upon request. Are there questions or comments? All right, I will entertain a motion to declassify and by release the executive session minutes from August 2012 through September 2015.
I make a motion that we release the executive session meeting minutes from August 13th, 2012 through...
Discussion? Okay, those in favor?
Aye.
Declassified. Okay, so next we move on to new business, and we'll hear about the district curriculum accommodation plan. Maureen and Dennis.
I think we have some copies there that we can pass around so we can work at it when we're talking. So those are fresh off the press, our district curriculum accommodation plan. We just got them in last week and we've been distributing our work that took place last year leading into this year with the development of what's called a district curriculum accommodation plan, or DCAP for short. So if we go into the next slide, basically, and I think this was summarized in your notes, it's a tool that gives teachers strategies, common sense, research-based practices, things they can use in a regular ed classroom to support students. So that's kind of a very short, little summary of what it is. But one reason why we have it, it's actually required by law. So it's in one of the Mass General laws. And so I kind of pulled out, this is the statement up here from the law, I pulled out some of the key elements to it, that it meets the students' needs on the next page. So it's really a focus on regular education classrooms and supporting all students. And it's a number of accommodations and classroom strategies that our teachers can be using to support all students. And we have some things, it could be helping children whose behavior may interfere with their learning. It could be for students who do not qualify for special education. And it also can include just programming that we have outside of the classroom, that we have a listing of supports related to mentoring, collaboration, and I'm going to go through some of that as part of the plan. So it's required by law, and every year, every couple of years, we're supposed to revise it, communicate it, and what we have found is that we revised it in a few years, and it wasn't really actively in use, and this happens sometimes in districts where you have it, but it's not so much user-friendly in the hands of teachers. So we really worked all last year with this committee of teachers and counselors and different representatives to create that plan. So when we met with the committee, we met, I don't know, probably six, 7, 8 times last year, and we came up with what we felt was the purpose in our district of the DCAP. So you have a whole list there, and it's also in the packet if you want to go through. We obviously wanted to provide assistance to the general education teachers, and that's the main part of the DCAP. But we also wanted to, if you jump down, encourage parental involvement. About some of the methods we are going to be using to kind of get this information out. So it's not just a static document that people are using, that everyone is familiar with what's in it. But we also wanted to identify resources that are available so the community will know what we are doing in the schools and what, and so parents know as well. on the page, and it's probably easier, I would recommend looking in the packet. I just kind of pulled out a bit of the summary there. So the second section, we have a listing of resources for parents. And so in groups of categories, we have professional development, social, emotional, homeschool partnerships, technology. I just pulled out a few of them. And so this would be, let's say we are about to have our parent teacher conferences, and or say there's someone new to the district, or they're looking up on our website, what's going on, what's happening in the district. These are the numerous different services and programs that we have going on to support our teachers, and so they can support our students in the classroom. So one element is a strong professional development program, including mentoring and teacher induction, so that's listed up there. For social emotional programs, we have a lot of the character education at the elementary level, the Reader's Challenge, a lot of things that I know you are familiar with, but all of that really helps with supporting the students in the classrooms. We're really trying to look for new ways to bridge the gap between home and school. And iParent, iStudent portals could be one thing. Websites are another method. It could be emails, communication. So there's a whole listing of how we're trying to engage parents. We go to the next section, and I'm going to skip over to page 8 in your packet. In that section, we talk about general accommodations that could take place in any of the classrooms in the district. We have 4 main categories. You would have how we might make accommodations with the presentation of material, like breaking assignments into segments or chunks for students, maybe using a concrete example of a concept before you talk about an abstract concept, and there's a whole listing in there of what teachers could do to help support students with the presentation material. Environment, this is one that I'm always very keen on when I walk into classrooms, and what the classroom environment looks like and what's going on in there. It could be having students sit either in preferential seating for their needs. It could be away from distractions. It could be in front of the room. I mean, each student has different needs where they should be sitting in a classroom. It could be providing like brain breaks or opportunities for movement in a class. It could be pods or seats so you can move around in a different environment, or where you locate specific material. So there's a lot you can do in the environment to really support students. Time demands would be a couple of examples listed are following specific routines for setting time limits, so or maybe cueing students throughout so they know how much time they have. And the last area would be materials. So it could be simply providing copies of notes for students that would be helpful. It could be uncluttering, for visual materials, uncluttering assignments so it's easy to read. And so there's a lot more in there. So basically, if we have a student, all of these can be used in the classroom, but why would we use a study team, or if I notice a student struggling in an area, and then I can kind of take this out as a handbook and say, okay, well, where are the issues I'm seeing? Okay, well, maybe I can try this out. It's a resource for teachers, general ed teachers, to apply any of these accommodations in the classroom. If we go to the next slide, we also give some suggestions, and that's on the next pages, on page 12 in the handout. We have content-specific accommodations that the community came up with. So I won't read them all, but there could be sometimes in math, if you are going to allow a calculator for certain items, or a math facts table for something, or manipulatives, to listen to it. It could be using trackers when students are reading, to help them track the lines when they're reading. In writing, it could be the editing checklist that the student's given at the answer when we go back and check their writing. And so I think this is a great toolkit. It's something that can be used. You could have an editing checklist at the elementary level, middle school, and at the high school level. They're going to look a little bit different, but the idea of using it, you certainly can use that as an example at all the levels. And it's kind of providing that for the teachers so they know that, hey, this is a place I can go if I need to work on that. On the last page, we come to that just to give you an overview. Last year we spent, like I said, we spent almost the whole year reviewing our past DCAP that we had. We did have a document. We reviewed that. We reviewed a number of different DCAPs from around the state and kind of picked out elements we liked and elements we didn't like. And then we broke up into subcommittees and worked on various sections. These are Google Docs and came up with a draft, and then spent the end of the year last year revising and coming up with a pretty final version. And then we put it in a format where we can publish it. We felt that it was important that it wasn't just a handout that went out to everyone, that we're saying this is really important, and that's why we wanted to have a really nice brochure for all the teachers to say, have it stand out and not get lost. So it's been printed up, it's on the website. We're presenting tonight about it. There are presentations for at the faculty meetings, and also it was important to us that we had it in hands for teachers before they went into the parent-teacher conferences, and so that's something that some of them will reference as well. So, and it's great for a parent, it's a great resource when you say, I'm wondering about help in writing or any of the content. You can look at this yourself. It's up on the website under curriculum and DCAP, and you can say, okay, maybe this is something that we can talk about a bit of a strategy and work as a team with the teachers. And so we're going to review it this year. We have follow-up meetings with the DCAP committee. We made a few adjustments this fall, available at child study teams, and trying to put it to use after our launch this month.
So it's a lot of great work you've done. You can clearly see it in pieces there. So one question that I guess I would ask is, how will we measure progress? And I'll use the term success, but I guess there's never a clear definition of that. How do we know that we're making progress in these areas? How do we know that we're, evolving? How do you know that we're kind of, reaching our goals or attaining our goals in a measure, not just a measure. I mean, I guess at the end of the day, the measurable way is the student performance, very simply. But how do you track that?
So I can tell you that a high quality DCAP, I'll see these the at-risk kids are being provided accommodations in the general ed setting. Hopefully see fewer special education reports. Those kind of kids that just need a little more support in the general ed setting.
Okay.
So that's one data point.
Something else too, I'm trying to think of like the measurement data point, but ultimately it would lead to that. It's when you have the child study team and you sit around and you have a reference point, and we were discussing having all of our child study teams and every school, there are forms that we use, referrals, but now that we have this resource, some districts will have a form where when a child's referred, and a teacher can come in and say, I've tried this with success, or there's ways to track it in response to
So it would be less subjective.
Right,
And
so
it
you
would
can
be
show
more
data.
definitive in terms of the data and the items.
Yeah, and so you can refer back to that. And what's nice, once you start to, have documentation that tracks it, that's something that can, carry on as well. Year to year, teachers, share to make sure that the students graduating, entering as a good transition in the next grade. So I think it's a process first. We're kind of in that first phase of, communicating what is it, what does all this mean, how do we use it, and then we really want it to become ingrained, and that's to your point, in our culture rather than a document that, okay, we met our requirement for the state, and it's talking about trying to make it as user-friendly as we can.
So I have a question for you. So when I'm looking at this and thinking this looks fabulous, because I'm thinking of my own children, I'm thinking of other children that I know. From a teaching perspective, when a teacher has, for lack of a better term, a challenging classroom, they've got multiple children who may not have an IEP but have their own set of issues. How does a teacher seek help? And what if, some of these things are very common sense and set up there, and some are not. Do they go to you? How do they initiate the conversation to help them make some changes in the classroom and help children?
To the point of the DCAP, when you read through it, most of these they're just best practices. It's just, kind of reminders. I mean, teachers are doing
A lot of this.
Yes.
I mean, I know most
as I read
a
through
lot
it,
of this, it's familiar.
it's going on. It's more, you use it when you're thinking about like targeting in area for, a student saying, okay, well, this hasn't worked, doesn't seem to work, what else could I do? So one piece, it's not really mean-to-one at the building level. Certainly, I do walkthroughs, and if, someone wanted input, I can say, okay, I've said, I always use the classroom example of, but when I see best practices, I try to share it with other classrooms of how it can help, other teachers out. But with the principals and talking to the teachers and that back and forth, and they'll ask them today and say, what do you think? But sometimes it comes up at team meetings, so they meet regularly. I mean, it's great in our district how, all across, K to 12, people, they're meeting, and they're talking about students and curriculum, data, and meeting regularly. So sometimes that will come up there, but we also have the child study team. So if it's something when you're, collaborating with your mentor, if you're a new teacher, you'll see your mentor for that, building principal of your team, and but it'll go to that team so you can have other resources. And sometimes you might have someone who can jump in, come in and do an observation, like if you're.
Sometimes I think it's, it's not necessarily behavior in isolation, because that would probably be a lot easier. It's a combination of behaviors that don't necessarily fall on the scales, that I just kind of want to know that the teachers feel comfortable seeking assistance.
You might find given students given some of these accommodations that behavior might decrease as well.
Yeah, definitely. I can see that just from the few that I've read, how, giving them an opportunity to stand up and move.
But what I'm saying is that this creates a greater degree of consistency across tools and techniques and approaches that the teachers have to leverage and use versus in the past it was kind of left to a building kind of approach.
Or something to add to that.
Yeah.
That's great.
And that's why when we, something to the year, so that the teachers can input, input on, what's right and what is.
That's right.
Excellent. That is done.
Thank you. Great work.
Okay, so the next item under new business is highlights of the Mass Conference recently on November 5th through 7th. The Massachusetts Association of School Committees and Superintendents met on Cape Cod in Dr. and Diana.
Sure. I went to a couple kind of repeats from last year, just more current information on park and Common Core, trying to learn more about that because I know we're going to be making decisions, and I know that we need to be educated and know what we're really talking about. So, I found that interesting. One of the areas that has always kind of been confusing to me, and I can't say that I feel like completely clarified in this life, but I went to district determined measures. I'm trying to understand a little bit more about that and how that looks up here and how it looks down here in the schools. I also went to a really interesting panel on managing the opiate crisis, which was very alarming. I did be interested out in schools. So those were mine. And I feel like I was kind of a little all over the place, but it was good. I learned a little bit in a lot of different areas. I think last year when I went, I was more in Common Core and regional school districts and park. This year I was like, okay, I want to learn a little bit more about other areas of our, schools and what they're involved in and our students are involved in. So I found it very informative and very helpful.
Learning new topics is always
Yeah,
pretty
I feel
strict.
like I was more like funneled last year, and this year I was like, okay, I want to learn other things and different things that are affecting our schools, not necessarily curriculum like the opioid crisis. There's other things that affect our students, and I think they can't say. I feel like there's a part of a lot of students that athletics is really important to. So yeah, I enjoyed it.
I went to several of the sessions as well. One of the first ones I went to was on managing and presenting regional school district budgets. So I always find this conference to be very pragmatic, and it's a great place to borrow ideas. So myself and Jay have been talking over the last year to 18 months about kind of a different look, a different presentation to the FY16 budget. So I've got some terrific ideas from some other school districts. On the use of feedback, specifically surveys, and right now we're in the process of working with our Teachers Association and taking a look at different survey instruments that our students and our staff will be using to be incorporated into the evaluation process. So some useful information there. And then I was in the same session with Diane on the park assessment. And very long, I think it was a double session.
It was a double session.
Very long. And believe it or not, there was a lot of folks from MASC who very much wanted to engage in the whole policy debate about why are we jumping into this.
And wanted to dive in.
Which was interesting. I was there more for, there was two districts, Burlington and Revere, who had done a lot of extensive work around technology. And one of the takeaways that I had was Burlington, which is a one-to-one school district. So we're talking every grade 1 up. The kids have iPads. Very technology rich. Talked about using a process called cash proctoring, something I never heard of, in administering the park, where basically the test is downloading onto the district server connection with the Pearson servers through the internet. It's through their own internal servers. So when they were presenting on that, lo and behold, none of the tech glitches that we experienced last spring when we were doing our pilot. So I thought that was very interesting, and I felt like saying, well, how come nobody told us and the rest of the state when we were struggling through this? So some, as Diane said, a lot of good pragmatic takeaways from the conference.
As for myself, I went to several of the same presentations. I paid some attention to, let's see, school budgets, fiduciary responsibility, budget accountants, things like that. In addition, legal issues and unfunded mandates was another interest, the Office of the State Auditor. And I attended the Division 4 meeting as well, so they will be having some programming coming up, and we should get that information through email, so whether it's park related or, they're always willing to take suggestions and things like that, so. And also school foundations, so we're expanding our local foundations and seeking for the community support. So overall, it was very interesting. It was good to get a cross-section of what's going on around the state and what kinds of implications they have.
I know what other schools are doing too, and Jim was saying, like, you walk away with some great ideas from listening to some of these panels, because they're doing some things that help us.
Okay, so next we move on to correspondence. Does anyone have correspondence to share? Hearing none. Any other matters not anticipated by this committee within 48 hours of this meeting? Okay.
We still have an opening.
So, okay.
Anybody from Upton wants to be on the school committee? We do have one application so far, but I'd like to get a few more in. If anybody wants to volunteer, it would be nice, someone from Upton. That's all.
Okay, very good. Let's see, future agenda items include a discussion of interacting with boys in the elementary classroom on December 9th. School filtration system, I believe the policies from first grade that we mentioned this evening, December 8th. Any other matters of our discussion this evening? Okay, hearing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hearing no opposition, meeting is adjourned at 7:18 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you.
What?